Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Two girls stood near the locker room of the culinary college and discussed the celebration of the approaching new year. Catherine immediately told her buddy that she was going to celebrate the event with her boyfriend. Her friend Julia smiled sadly and replied that this time she would celebrate the holiday alone. Catherine looked at her friend in surprise and asked, perplexed, "You told me only recently that you will celebrate with Austin, and now you said something completely different. We had a fight with him yesterday, and it seems like it's for good. I'm even blacklisted on his cell phone now," Julia said. "And you didn't say anything about it in class all day today. I can see that you're sour. I asked you what happened. Why did you tell me? I have to pull everything out of you. Again because of your apartment quarreled," said the interlocutor. "Of course, he is already quite naked, almost threatening to force me to sell the property. And I told you that I don't want to do it because we don't know whether we'll have a relationship with him or not. And Austin is sleeping on the idea that I'll sell the apartment and he'll open his own business," Julia said sullenly. "You were right to deny him that request. Let him realize his dream on his own, or look, he's the center of the earth. You're right, because if things don't work out with Austin and you sell your place, where will you go? You don't have anyone, and the orphanage won't give you an apartment a second time. And don't feel bad about fighting with Austin. You've already quarreled 3 times for that reason, and you'll see that he'll show up in a couple of days," the friend said. "I don't want Austin to come now. I'm sick of being stressed out by his antics. You know, I think he's only seeing me because of the apartment," Julia said glumly. "You're in the middle of something. Anyway, if you and Austin make up, that's good. If you and Austin reconcile, that's good. If you and Austin get back together, you can celebrate with us like old times," she said. "I celebrated New Year's Eve with you twice before I met Austin," Angelica said uncomfortably. "Don't get me started. My boyfriend and I are always happy to see you," said her friend. Catherine met Julia when entering college, and the girls immediately became friends. Classmates and teachers then wondered what could connect these two students. After all, Catherine was an energetic and combative person, but Angelica, on the contrary, she was a shy and modest girl. Catherine, when meeting Julia, learned about the difficult fate of a friend. Angelica was brought up in an orphanage. Her parents were lovers of strong drinks, the use of white, and led to their death. Angelica's parents burned to death from carbon monoxide, and with them their 4-year-old daughter. Angelica was saved by the fact that she was at school at the time. After this tragedy, 10-year-old Julia was placed in an orphanage. The girl did not want to live in this institution and asked that her maternal grandma, and so it was a few days before New Year's Eve when Angelica told her friend that she had reconciled with her Austin. Her friend congratulated her on this event, although in her heart, she realized that the truce would be short-lived, which is exactly what happened. Literally, 2 days before the new year, Catherine learned that her friend in a puff of dust quarreled with her boyfriend. Angelica tried to hold back emotions at the meeting, but could not, and just cried and said, "I believed Austin that he was remorseful, as he sang me songs with a nightingale that he loved me. I even offered to be his wife, but as soon as I said yes, he offered to sell the apartment. I immediately told him to leave, and in response I heard that I will regret that I did so. Austin has shown his true colors, and he's not worth your tears. Don't you realize that this man doesn't really love you? He only wants your place. And I can tell you more than that. I found a girl from the orphanage who believes pretty words. You can argue with me. I'm not gonna argue with you. You see, you have to know you love this man and only then agree to a truce. Now let's talk about something else. I care about your relationship now, but I care more about your state of mind because the holiday is a few days away. And now I don't even want to hear you talk about making up with Austin. That's your business. But know that my boyfriend and I, as well as my parents, are waiting for you to come visit us. You want to come with Austin or by yourself? And you know, if you say no, I'll be very offended." "Thank you." Angelica answered one syllable because she couldn't answer anything else at that moment. Julia spent New Year's Eve at her friend's house. She watched her friend happy with a young man and was happy for her friend. Angelica also wanted to celebrate the holiday with Austin at the moment, but it was no longer possible. The girl a day before New Year's Eve saw the guy with a young woman who he kissed right on the street. Angelica did not expect to see such a picture. For the girl, what she saw was a blow, and at the same time she realized that for her since that time Austin simply did not exist. Winter vacation flew by very quickly. Angelica all this time sat at home and read ebooks on a tablet. Catherine tried to get her friend outside for a walk. However, Angelica found various reasons to refuse and stay at home. The girl could not tell Catherine that she was uncomfortable with her friend and her boyfriend. Julia felt in such cases the third superfluous. Soon the buddies graduated from culinary college. Angelica immediately hurried to get a job. The girl was very lucky. She was taken pastry chef in a cozy cafe, which was not far from Julia's house. By this time Ekaterina was preparing for the wedding and did not hurry to get a job because she did not want to work in her specialty. Angelica knew about it and wondered why Catherine had gone to culinary college as she didn't want to work. She often asked her friend about it, and now Angelica once again asked her friend, "If you do not like cooking, then why did you go to this college?" "I'm telling you for the 100th time that I had to go somewhere to get at least, so that parents do not pester on this issue. So I went to culinary school. And in general, I know enough to cook at home. As soon as I get married, my husband will need to feed," replied Catherine. "But still need to work. You're not going to sit at home all the time," Angelica said. "This year I will stay at home, take a break from study, and then it will be seen. Especially, you know that my fiancé has very well-to-do parents, and maybe you will help us well in terms of finances," laughing said her friend. "You and John are lucky," Angelica said. "You'll be lucky too, but only if you don't live a reclusive life. You've got a job, and in the evenings at least go out for a walk, instead of reading your ebooks at home," she said. "Well, don't complain. You are in a hurry to marry me off," Julia said, smiling. A month later, Catherine and John were married. On that day, the newlywed, having found the right moment, told Julia about her pregnancy. Her friend gave a joyful yelp and began to shower her friend with congratulations. Then Julia suddenly asked Catherine, "Does John already know about it?" "You're the first person I told. I want to give my husband a present on his wedding night, and you do not tell anyone. I do not even my mother does not know about it," happily said Catherine. "Well, you give? I would probably have already told everyone about it," said the interlocutor with a smile. Time slowly moved on. Julia continued to work in the cafe, where her employer was proud of her, as the girl was responsible for her work. And then one day the young woman went home after a day of work. Angelica's thoughts were occupied by the fact that she thought about what gift to make a friend on her birthday. The girl was so absorbed in her thoughts that she unwittingly ran into a young man. Angelica was startled because she not only pushed the man, but also knocked over a glass of coffee. The contents of the cup spilled all over the stranger's snow-white shirt. Julia felt her face blushing red, which was always the case when she got into awkward situations or embarrassed. The girl looked at the young man and could not say anything. She couldn't even squeeze out words of apology. Julia was even at this moment afraid to look at the stranger's face, and at the same moment she heard laughter. Laughing was the man she had just pushed. Angelica looked apprehensively at the young man. The stranger looked at the girl and laughed even more. The young woman looked perplexed at the man and could not understand what made him laugh so much. The stranger, after a couple of minutes, calmed down and said, "Sweet young lady, would have seen your face now, you would have cackled with me. Such a feeling that you have done something wrong and do not know in which corner to hide. Since you're not apologizing, what kind of punishment should I give you? You just ruined my favorite shirt. It was an accident. Let's take it off and I'll wash it for you," almost crying, said the girl. And at the same moment the stranger laughed again. The young woman looked at the young man and again did not understand why he was laughing. The guy could calm down not immediately. As soon as he stopped laughing, he said, "Do you realize what you're saying? You just offered me to undress in the street. Are you going to do the laundry here too? No, you are not boring." After these words, Julia laughed. She realized at that moment that she had said something stupid, and the young man was watching the young woman. The young woman, seeing the stranger's gaze, immediately faltered and asked seriously, "What is it?" "You are just very beautiful," the young man said. The girl was embarrassed by these words. Even her ex-boyfriend had never said such a thing to her, and here a stranger said it. Julia could only say in response, "Don't exaggerate. I was telling the truth. There's no reason for me to deceive you. You know, let's get acquainted. My name is Billy. What's your name?" A man said it. "Julia," the girl replied quietly. "Can I go back to you? I can see you're in a hurry. Let me give you a ride, Because I'm already embarrassed to stand in a dirty shirt and catch the perplexed looks of passersby, said the young man. I don't know, Julia said. Then I'll leave it up to you, since you don't know. Come on, there's my car. And don't worry, I'm not going to hit on you, the new acquaintance said with a smile. Julia followed the man without thinking. The couple got into a white-colored foreign car. The man smiled at the travel companion and asked her to tell about herself. The girl was again embarrassed, because in front of her was a complete stranger, and she did not want to tell him anything about herself. The driver of the car, as if read the thoughts of the interlocutor, and grinned and said, You don't want to tell me, then don't. I'm not going to force you. Let me better tell you about myself. Maybe you will not look at me with frightened eyes. From Billy's story, Julia learned that the man turned 30 yesterday. His parents are only his mother, who went to live in France a couple of years ago, and his father died of a heart attack 6 years ago. Billy lives in a 2-room apartment, has his own business. He was married, but the joint life did not work out, and he and his wife just quietly divorced. Billy told everything so interesting about himself that Julia involuntarily wanted to tell this man about herself. And as soon as the interlocutor was silent, the young woman involuntarily began to tell about her own fate. Billy did not interrupt the interlocutor, but only listened attentively. He did not even know why he wanted to know everything about this girl. The young people did not notice how they spent a couple of hours in the car, and during this time they both realized that they trusted each other with the most intimate of their lives. Julia was the first to realize that she had opened her soul to a man she had just met. She was suddenly embarrassed and said, How could you do that I told you everything about myself? It seems to me that you wanted to, and there is nothing wrong with that. I like your embarrassment more and more every minute. Let me take you home, but you have to promise to give me your phone number. I don't want this to be our first and last meeting. I won't say more, because you'll think I'm Don Juan, and I don't want that, Billy said. The young woman smiled and nodded. Billy drove Julia home. She dictated her phone number to him and then got out of the car. The girl came home in a pensive state. She thought about her new acquaintance. Julia suddenly realized that her attitude to this man is completely different than it was to Austin. The next day, the young woman thought about Billy and wondered whether the man would call or not. It was the end of the working day, and the new acquaintance had not called. The girl was very upset about it. Billy didn't call during the next 3 days either. Angelica was angry at herself that the man did not call. It seemed to her that it was her fault. Billy showed up quite unexpectedly. The girl was walking home from work. As near her entrance, she saw a familiar foreign car. Julia stopped near the car, from which Billy came out with a bouquet of white roses. The man approached the girl and held out the bouquet with the words, Here I am. I couldn't call you because I had drowned my phone in the bathtub that day, and your number was there. And then I had some business to attend to. Now I think that you will forgive me for such a long absence, but I promise that it will not happen again. I never thought I'd see you again. How glad I am to see you, the young woman said, embarrassed. Don't drive me crazy with your embarrassment, Billy said, his voice hoarse with excitement. I didn't do it on purpose. Do you want to come over to my place? The girl said quietly. Billy spent that night at Julia's house. The girl was happy in the arms of a man who gave her many compliments and confessed that for the first time in his life, he was experiencing a new feeling, which he had not known before. Julia, laughing, asked her partner, Do you want to confess your love to me? Exactly, but I don't think it's something to joke about, Billy said seriously. I just didn't expect it because I never believed in love at first sight, answered Angelica quietly. Now you can believe it. I want you to be my wife. That's the kind of woman I want to have around me as a life partner. You'll probably say I'm saying these words too soon after meeting you, but please believe me. I'm not a man who likes to say words to the wind, and you'll see that soon enough, Billy said. Let's not just rush into things. I'm really not ready for all this. I feel like it's happening in a dream, not in real life. And if I open my eyes now, you'll disappear, Angelica said quietly. You won't, the man said affectionately, pulling her to him and then kissing her face tenderly. The next morning, Billy took the young woman to work and promised to call her during the day. Julia nodded in response, although she really wanted to hug the man and not part with him. The girl went into the cafe immediately afterward and then looked out the window where she saw Billy driving away in a car. Julia spent the whole working day thinking about her new acquaintance and whether they would see each other today or not. Billy didn't call until the evening when the young woman arrived home. Angelica happily answered him and couldn't stand it. She asked, "Am I going to see you tonight? Did you ever doubt it? I hope that you are embarrassed again and your face is covered with red paint again," said the interlocutor. "You're a pest," she said with a laugh. Julia was happy with the young man's words. She wanted to see him right away. She thanked fate that she had spilled that glass of coffee on Billy, for that action had been the occasion for their acquaintance. Billy arrived after the phone call an hour later. He brought the girl as a gift a huge teddy bear, which in its paws held a red heart. The man handed the toy to Julia with the words that she now owned his heart. The girl pressed the bear to her chest and said in response that she would cherish the gift. From that day on, the couple never parted. Billy went to Julia's house after his work, and the man came with a small, inexpensive present, which he solemnly handed to the landlady. The girl was delighted with these gifts, but jokingly scolded the young man and asked him not to spend money. Billy, in response, said that he was ready to spend just to see a happy smile on the face of his beloved. The girl told her friend about her relationship with Volodya only a week later. Catherine, as she heard the news, then exclaimed into the telephone receiver that right now will come to visit for all the details. And in fact, in a couple of hours, the young woman was already sitting in Angelica's apartment. The guest looked demandingly at her friend and said, "Come on, quietly, tell me. You know that until I know everything, I will not leave. I can also add that until I see your boyfriend, I will not leave either." "Catherine, I must be the luckiest woman in the world because I love Billy with all my heart. I don't even know how to tell you how I feel about him," she said quietly. Then Julia told her friend about her acquaintance with Volodya. The landlady showed all the gifts from the chosen one to her friend. Catherine looked at her friend and saw that Angelica is really fascinated by the new acquaintance. The guest was sincerely happy for her friend. And soon came Billy, who did not expect that Julia would not be alone. The man was a little dazed at the sight of Catherine, and then quickly gathered himself and extended his hand to the girl for acquaintance. The guest looked seriously at her friend's lover and only then responded to the handshake. After this introduction, Julia had already come to her friend's birthday party, accompanied by Billy. They presented the birthday girl with a bouquet of roses and a flower vase. Catherine was touched by the gift and quietly said to her friend, "You haven't forgotten that I dream about this vase." "Of course not, but on the money I would not have pulled myself, so thank my favorite," he financed with a smile, said Angelica. "Yes, you're both of my good guys. Come on, when will you try on the wedding ring?" Catherine said. "All that you need to know." "Don't worry, you'll find out about it first," laughing, said her friend. Soon Catherine gave birth to her firstborn, who was named Maxim. And after this event was followed by a wedding ceremony at Julia's with Billy. At the wedding ceremony came the mother of the groom, and Angelica met with her mother-in-law Inessa. The girl immediately liked Billy's mother. The two women immediately found a common language between them. Angelica was especially happy about this circumstance, as she dreamed of finding a second mother in the person of her mother-in-law, which actually turned out. After the wedding, Julia moved to live with her husband. The young woman, as soon as she moved in, she asked her husband if she could make a rearrangement in the apartment. Billy from this question laughed and replied that now she is free to do whatever she wants, since she became the mistress of this dwelling. And Angelica began to create coziness in the apartment with great pleasure. The young woman quit her job, as it was far to get to the cafe. However, she told her husband that she would soon find a suitable place to work again. Billy did not take this news with much joy, since he liked that he was met at home by a loving wife, who always had time to prepare a delicious dinner by the time she came. So the man said to his chosen one, "And maybe you will not be in a hurry to go to work. I am so pleasant when you meet me, always in an elevated mood. And I'm always going to meet you like this, because I love you," gently said his wife. "I can't argue with you. I want you to be happy living with me. Now I have one more important thing to tell you. You know that my mom gave us a tidy sum for the wedding, and I'd like to expand my business. My 2 outlets are on the periphery, and I'd like to think about the downtown area. What do you think of my offer?" Billy said, "Why do you ask me that? In our family, you're the entrepreneur, not me," said the wife. "That's not the point here. You're my soulmate, and I have to respect your opinion. Maybe you wanted to spend the money on other things. For example, to go to my mom in France or a diamond ring," said the husband seriously. "I feel better walking down the street without diamonds, and we will still have time to go to my mom, because only recently she spent. Let Inessa at least have time to miss us. So honey, I support your proposal." By the way, we can still sell my one-room apartment. Also will be additional finances. With a smile, said the young woman. While we will not hurry with the sale, it is better to rent. And for supporting my idea, thank you very much, said the head of the family. After this conversation was a little more than a month, Julia was going to go to look for a job, as a young woman felt bad. She barely had time to run to the restroom before she threw up. The bewildered girl then proceeded to the bedroom and sat down on the bed. Angelica thought for a few minutes about what had just happened to her, but found no answer to her question. The woman stood up as she felt a bout of nausea again. She quickly ran to the restroom, where once again she threw up. Angelica felt herself becoming dizzy. She realized that the job search was off today, as she was in no condition to go anywhere. Julia went back into the bedroom and lay down on the bed. Soon the young woman was asleep. When Billy arrived for dinner, he saw his wife asleep. He was very surprised, for she had never gone to bed at that time of day. The head of the family quietly approached the sleeping girl and touched her forehead. From this touch, the spouse woke up and looked at the loved one in surprise, and then said, "Was I asleep?" "And you have any doubts about it?" Question on question answered the chosen one. "I'm sorry, I just don't feel well today. I can't understand why I feel nauseous," she said tiredly. "Maybe you have poisoned yourself." "Although it's impossible, you're my boarder, do not cook," excitedly spoke husband, and then added, "Can we call an ambulance just in case?" "No need. Tomorrow everything will pass. Come on, I'll feed you better, because you don't have enough time for lunch," the young woman said. The next day, Julia's condition did not improve. She was about to go to the clinic for a doctor's appointment when a friend called her to find out how she and Billy were doing. Here Angelica and told her friend about her well-being. Catherine laughed and advised her to go to the pharmacy before going to the therapist. And Julia immediately understood what her friend was hinting at. She thanked her friend and ended the conversation. Catherine was right in her assumption that Angelica got pregnant, as the young woman after the phone conversation went to the pharmacy, where she bought a test. And soon Julia already saw the result on the litmus paper, which clearly showed 2 blue stripes. The young woman was happy. She immediately informed her friend about it, and then called her husband's mother and told her the good news. Julia immediately decided that she would tell her husband the news as soon as he arrived home for lunch. And as soon as Billy entered the apartment, his wife rushed to hug him. The man was surprised by such a meeting. Usually the wife came up and caresses his cheek with the palm of her hand. Billy hugged his wife in response and quietly said, "Tony, what did we have?" "The best thing that could be. Catherine and Mom already know about it. All that's left is to tell you. You are going to be a daddy," the young woman said happily. The man for the first few minutes looked at the chosen one, and then hugged her even tighter and said, "You know how to make gifts. I am happy with your message. Now I will not only have a favorite wife, but also a favorite baby. Now any job is out of the question. You now have to take care of yourself and another life that has been born." Time quietly moved on. Julia, at her husband's insistence, never went to work. She often called her husband's mother as well as her friend. The young woman was happy because she had a loved one, and soon she will become a mommy. However, 2 months before the birth, her husband came home in a bad mood. Julia immediately realized that the spouse, something that bothers. The young woman turned to her husband. "You are not sick?" "No, I'm fine," the man said glumly. "But I can see that you're not doing well. Maybe you can share," the wife said. "A little problem at work. Don't worry about it. Let's talk about something else," Billy said, and at the same moment his cell phone rang. The man glanced at the number and frowned, then went into the other room to answer it. Julia heard her husband talking harshly to someone. The woman couldn't hear what her spouse was talking about, but she could tell that the conversation was unpleasant for her husband. As soon as Billy appeared in the room, she again asked if everything was all right with the chosen one. The man replied only by saying that everything was fine. The next day, Billy came home from work later than usual and again in a bad mood. Julia was now seriously worried. The young woman began to ask her husband what was going on at work. However, the man asked the girl not to bring up this topic today. Angelica did not bother her husband, but she was unpleasant that the chosen one answered her so coldly. For a whole week, Billy came home in a bad mood and answered all the questions of his wife with one-word answers. Angelica was angry at her husband for this, and in desperation, even called her mother to ask her mother-in-law to talk to her son. "Inessa, As soon as she found out that Billy had some problems, immediately called him. After talking to his mother, the man turned to his spouse and asked her never to worry his mother about nothing again. Angelica, as soon as she heard this, cried and said, "So you can't worry your mom, but I can worry. Don't you realize that I'm worried about you?" "I'm sorry, my dear. You can't worry either. You're carrying our daughter. Be patient and everything will be fine," said the man. Julia sobbed and at the same moment grabbed her stomach. She moaned. The husband rushed to his wife, and she mumbled in unbearable pain. Billy put his wife on a chair and called an ambulance. A short time later, Julia was taken to the maternity hospital, and on the same day the young woman gave birth to a baby girl who was named Sophia. Billy barked himself very much that Angelica did not reach the due date. He blamed himself for the fact that recently he was not very attentive to his wife. Soon Julia was discharged. Billy met her with a large bouquet of white roses. The man fondly took the tiny package from the hands of the nurse and looked at the face of his daughter, happily said, "Our little girl has taken after her mother, just as beautiful." Now Julia had a new chapter in her life. She became a mom to an adorable baby girl. The young woman with delight babysat her daughter. She liked to bathe the girl, change diapers, feed from a bottle, sing children's songs. All this was watched by Angelica's husband, who was always ready to help his wife. A little more than a month flew by since Sophia's birth, and Billy came home earlier than usual. The man was a little tipsy, which surprised Julia very much, as he was indifferent to strong drinks. The woman, perplexed, asked the chosen one, "May I ask what was the reason for you to come in such a state?" "Just wanted to," said the head of the family gloomily. "I see that you do not have yet and at the same time the mood." Hiding irritation, said the wife. "Can I just go to bed? I have no desire to talk," the man said. Angelica decided that today it was not worth starting a conversation, and it would be better to do it in the morning, when the husband would be in a sober state. The woman took her daughter and began to hum a song to her. She tried to distract herself from the premonition of trouble. Julia did feel a sense of uneasiness in her soul. The next morning, the woman asked her husband to explain about yesterday. The man apologized and said that it would not happen again. Angelica made another attempt to talk to her husband, but the chosen one left the answer. After this conversation, several days passed and Billy came home in an elevated mood. In this connection, Julia's anxious state slowly subsided. The girl was again happy every day and thanked fate that everything was going so well in her life. However, soon everything changed. It happened on the eve of Sophia's 5th birthday. Billy came home and silently walked past his wife into the kitchen. Julia followed him in and looked questioningly at her husband. Her husband never did that. He always kissed her on the cheek when he came home from work, but here he just ignored her. Angelica saw that the head of the family seized her gaze, but stubbornly remained silent. The woman could not stand it and said, "Just do not tell me now that you are doing well. Since you see that everything is not fine, then maybe you will not bother me. I don't want to spoil your mood. I love you. Why don't you just shut up?" Billy said glumly. "You know you've been in such a dark mood a lot lately. I love you too, but you can't do this. Tell me what's going wrong at work," she said frustratedly. "I beg you to be patient. I'll fix everything in a couple of days," Billy said affectionately. Julia turned away from her husband and went to her daughter, who was whimpering in her crib. At the same moment, the young woman suddenly felt an uneasiness in her soul. She turned around to her husband, and he in turn was sitting on a chair and looking at the floor. Angelica calmed her daughter and then approached her husband and quietly spoke. "I love you. Tell me that we are fine." "All is well, on the other cannot be and cannot be," replied the husband. And the next day Julia saw her husband off and told him in the hallway to be careful and said that she was not calm in her heart. The head of the family smiled in response and said that the chosen one is too not cruciality of the situation. Angelica had been worried all day. Her husband hadn't come home for lunch. She tried to call him, but the subscriber was out of range. The woman waited for the evening, but in due time her husband did not show up. The girl did not know what to think. Only about 9 o'clock in the evening a phone call sounded and an unfamiliar female voice said that her husband was in the hospital. Angelica listened with horror to the interlocutor, who said that her husband had been beaten on the street and he had recently been delivered by a homeless man who had found the man in the basement of a 5-story building. Julia, after this call, called her friend and crying told the news and asked her friend to come. Catherine immediately agreed, as she understood that Angelica wanted to go to the hospital to her loved one, but she had no one to leave her daughter with. The woman told her husband about the attack on Billy and said that she would go to her friend for the night. John immediately agreed with his wife's decision and asked on his own behalf to support his wife's buddy. Catherine called a cab and after a while was already at the pal's place. The guest immediately saw that the friend was on the verge of hysteria. Catherine opened her purse and took out from there sedative pills. The woman handed the medicine to her friend and said in an orderly tone, "Until you take a pill, I will not let you go anywhere. You have to be strong now and think that everything will be fine. Drink it now." "I will." "Catherine, I'm very scared," Angelica said, crying. "I know, but you have to hold on. Promise me that as soon as you know about Billy's condition, you'll call me immediately. My husband won't go to bed until he knows what's wrong with your husband." "John is worried and told you to hang in there," Catherine said. Soon Julia was at the hospital. She was initially reluctant to be let in at the entrance because visiting hours had long since ended. However, the woman pleaded and almost falling on her knees asked to see her husband. The doctor on duty, who was present during the conversation, took pity on Julia and allowed the visit. From this man in a white coat, Angelica learned that her spouse had 2 broken ribs, as well as a compound fracture of the leg and a concussion. The young woman entered the ward with a rapid heartbeat. She was terribly worried about her loved one. As soon as she saw her husband, who was lying under the drip with his eyes closed, Angelica forced herself not to shriek. She quietly approached her husband and gently ran the back of her hand over Billy's cheek. At that touch, the man opened his eyes and looked at Angelica. He said softly, trying to smile, "My dear, how good to see you. Be quiet, please. You need to regain your strength now. I thought I would go crazy when I was informed that you were in the hospital, but now the most important thing is that I see you and can tell you how much I love you," holding back tears, said his wife. "Don't cry. I won't be able to bear your tears. Everything will be all right, you'll see," said her husband. Julia stayed with her husband that night with the doctor's permission. She told her husband about her childhood. Billy listened attentively, but soon fell asleep. The young woman looked at her husband's favorite sleeping face and thanked fate that her husband was alive after the attack. The girl did not yet know all the details of the attack, but she hoped that the bandits would be caught. Billy was in the hospital for almost 3 months. During this time, Julia tirelessly visited her husband. She already knew that a case had been opened on the incident and that the investigator had repeatedly questioned her husband. But Billy said that he had not seen the attackers and could not give any information about them. Julia did not believe these words of her husband because she knew that on the eve of the incident her husband was in a depressed mood. And that is the only reason why she had a conversation with her husband before the discharge. The woman turned to her husband. "Why are you covering up for the attackers? I am sure that you have seen these bandits in person and it is related to your work. I ask you to start cooperating with the investigation because it may happen again and then the outcome will be more deplorable." "Sweetheart, I didn't see who attacked you because I had my back to those people." "It won't happen again, believe me," my husband said. After the discharge, Billy stayed at home for the first week, which made Julia very happy. She was happy to have her husband by her side and not have to worry about him. However, Billy soon went to work and promised his wife that nothing bad would happen again. But a couple weeks after Julia's man was discharged, Julia received a call from an unknown phone number. A stranger rudely said to the young woman, "Apparently your husband is a complete fool if he hasn't learned his lesson after the hospital. Tell him you're next in line." "Wait, what do you mean me? What do you want from us? I don't know my husband's business. Tony, what do you want from us? I need to know about it. I'm asking you very much," the young woman said excitedly. "And you ask your husband, you are not a little girl," said the stranger, and at the same moment disconnected the connection. Julia looked at the telephone receiver with a shudder. She at that moment clearly realized that her husband is actually in big trouble, about which he kept silent. The woman called her husband, but he dropped the call. Angelica was frightened by this call. She was looking forward to her spouse from work. The girl called her husband every half an hour, but the chosen one kept dropping the call. But soon Billy came home and he was immediately approached by his spouse, who could not hold back tears and said, "How am I to understand you? Why did you answer me? I received a phone call today from a strange man who threatened me. You have to tell me everything now. No more excuses, because I'm scared. It's enough that you've already been beaten up. Do you really want that to happen to me? Calm down and tell me everything calmly. I've had a rough day today. "I apologize," the husband said. Julia saw that her husband was actually agitated and quickly told him about the call. The man listened to her with a frown and then remained silent for a few minutes. And only after that he spoke. "I have a request for you to leave before my mom for a while." "What does that mean? How is it to leave?" "Never without you. Tell me what's going on." "I'm tired of your riddles," Julia said. "I'll tell you in a nutshell. I'm being forced to pay for a place in the market, and I refused, so they beat me up. But I'm not going to pay, because I don't do it at the marketplaces in the periphery. You see, I don't have to pay someone for nothing," my husband said. "Are you crazy? And you're just telling me this now?" "I'm just asking you to give up this marketplace. We have enough income from the 2 places you say are on the periphery. I don't need the money. I need you," Julia said in despair. "Darling, I can't give up my principles. I started my business from scratch and paid no one, so why should I pay anyone now? I just want you to go away for a while I sort things out," Billy said. "No, I'm not leaving you. I made a vow when I got married that I'd be with you always, under any circumstances. You haven't forgotten that, have you?" she said. "Sweetheart, you realize that this is not the moment. I am seriously asking you to go away for a while. I will need literally a week, but maybe a couple days plus or minus." "Trust me, please," Billy said quietly. "No, either you and I leave together, or I'll be here. And you've already told me that everything will be all right, and then you ended up in the hospital and those bandits still haven't been found. And with all this, you suggest me to calm down and not to be nervous, and just leave you in a difficult moment. You're not gonna get it. I once again ask you to stop this business in the market," said the girl. "I repeat that I will not back down. Understand, my dear, that if I save now, then later I will despise myself for cowardice," said the husband, and then gently embraced his wife. He already at that moment realized that his wife has come to terms with his decision and will not start to bring up this topic again. After this conversation, a week passed. Julia was worried about her husband all this time, and she hoped that her favorite person would be able to settle things in business. She mentally asked the Almighty for only one thing, that there would be no grief in their life with Billy and their daughter. However, the young woman's pleas went unheeded, because just a few days later she was informed that her husband died. Julia heard this sad news on the phone, where a man's voice told her that Billy's car was blown up along with the owner. The woman initially did not believe the words of the stranger who informed her of the tragedy, but when the realization came, she screamed into the phone. "You're lying. Billy promised me that he and I would be fine. Don't call me because you got the wrong phone number. My Billy is alive." Next, Julia just dropped the phone out of her hands and quietly went down to the floor. She couldn't cry or scream at the moment. The woman wanted only one thing, that this phone call would not happen at all. She didn't remember how long she had been sitting on the floor in one position, but she received another phone call, and the same unfamiliar voice said that Julia had to go to the police tomorrow and then to the morgue. The woman listened to all this information in silence and did not answer anything. And only after she called her friend and in a muffled voice told about everything. Catherine, as soon as she heard about the tragedy, then at the same hour said that she would soon come. The woman was very worried about Julia and immediately called her husband, told the sad news, and said that she would go to her friend with her son. John did not object and said that as soon as the workday is over, he will come to them. Catherine, when she arrived at her friend's house, she expected to see her in sobs. However, she found her friend with a detached look on her face. Catherine fearfully began to shake her friend by the shoulders. The guest was disturbed by Julia's psychological state. She at this point only said one thing. "Angelica, I beg you to come to your senses." The landlady looked indifferently at her friend and obediently nodded in response. Catherine realized that the friend is in shock and therefore unexpectedly gave her friend a slap. This blow, as if taken out of a stupor, Julia, and she looked at the guest flooded with tears, and then said, "It cannot happen to me, but it has happened, and I have never sinned in my life. Answer me, why is it happening to me? Who have I crossed the road? Who have I done wrong?" Catherine, in response, only hugged her friend, as she could not say anything. Buddy pinned the sobbing Julia and just stroked her head like a small child. Catherine did not know what words to find at this moment to comfort her friend. Julia soon left for the police, and then the young woman was waiting for a lot of questions from the investigators, and after the identification of the body of her spouse, where she lost consciousness. Angelica came to herself in the corridor, where she was lying on a couch, and next to her was a man in a white coat. The doctor touched the woman's forehead and only after seeing that she had regained consciousness said, "You have grief, I understand, but you need to hold on. Now you need not only yourself, but also your daughter. I answered without your permission the phone that you called. It was your friend. I told her everything. She said her husband would come and pick you up." Julia nodded obediently. She couldn't say anything in response. The young woman did not understand what was happening. She did not want to realize that she would never see her loved one again and would never say a word of greeting to him. And then followed the funeral, which was attended by many people Julia didn't even know. She looked at the people present and couldn't understand what these people were doing here. Angelica even wanted to shout for them to go away. She wanted to be alone for the moment. Next to the young woman stood the mother of the dead Billy, who, as soon as she heard about the tragedy, had taken the first flight to the United States. She cried silently and quietly stroked her daughter-in-law's shoulder. The day after the funeral, Inessa approached her daughter-in-law and suggested that she go with her daughter to live in France. Julia refused. The widow quietly said to her mother-in-law, "Here rests my favorite person, and I cannot leave him here alone. I'm not telling you that right at this moment to leave everything and go away. Let a little time pass, and then move to me. You know very well that I treat you as my own daughter, and except you and Sophia, I have no one else close to me," Inessa said. "Thank you for the offer, but we will stay here. But you can come at any time, as my daughter and I will always be glad to see you," the widow said quietly. 2 weeks passed after the funeral, during which time Inessa stayed with her daughter-in-law. A friend of Julia's often visited them and supported Billy's mother's suggestion that Angelica should go abroad. However, the young woman invariably refused to do so, and so Inessa left and Julia was left alone with her daughter. The very next day, Catherine came to see her and started a conversation about Billy's business. She said, "You refuse to leave with your mother-in-law. Okay, I can understand that, but this is a different issue. My husband and I are worried about you. What are you going to do about the outlets? As time goes on, businesses need to be monitored and managed. I'm going to ask your husband to help me sell. I'm not going to risk anything. I have no entrepreneurial spirit," the young woman said. "You know, I'm glad you decided to do this. And of course, John will help you in this," said Catherine. After Billy's funeral, Julia's mother-in-law died a year later. The young woman felt Inessa's death very much. She loved her late husband's mother with all her heart. After the funeral of her mother-in-law, Angelica sold her relative's apartment in France and on the advice of a friend put the money from the sale of real estate in the bank. Time flew by imperceptibly and Julia enrolled her daughter in kindergarten and herself went to work in a cafe as a pastry chef. The young woman fully devoted herself to raising her daughter and work. Her friend quite often scolded for the fact that she began to lead a reclusive lifestyle again. Catherine reprimanded Angelica repeatedly. "I understand that you have lost a loved one, but this is no reason to become a nun. Believe me, Billy wouldn't approve of your behavior. I'm sure he's looking down on you from heaven and resenting you. Your late husband would want you to be a happy woman again, not pining for him. You need to take your mind off it and accept that you are now free of all ties. Stop talking nonsense. I do not need anyone. It is easier for me to live like this when no one but my daughter is not around," answered Angelica's friend. A couple more years passed. Sophia already went to first grade as Catherine came to visit her friend and said that she and her husband are going to move to New York. Julia took the news without enthusiasm because for her friend was the closest person and she did not want to part with her. Angelica, after this message of Catherine, involuntarily wept and sadly said, "You will leave and I will be all alone. As much as I do not want you to leave me, but I realize that your husband has prospects for work in New York. So don't get all wet. You have the opportunity to move to another city too. But you don't want to make any changes in your life. You put on your inconsolable widow's mask and you revel in it. How many times can I tell you that you can't live like this? You are still young. You need to organize your personal life," said Catherine. "Don't lecture me. Now it's not about how I should live. I just don't want you and John to leave, but I realize that it will happen anyway. Let's make a deal so that all the time we will keep in touch with each other," quietly said the interlocutor. "Of course, how could you even think that you and I will stop communicating?" "Oh, you," mumbled Buddy. And soon Catherine with her husband and son moved to live in New York. The parting of friends was tearful. They promised each other that they would not leave in a difficult moment. Catherine, in farewell, asked her friend to reconsider her views on life and finally removed the mourning for the death of his spouse, and in response heard from her friend, "Let's not start a conversation with you on this topic again. Let life take its course. I don't want to just rush things." Julia, after the departure of her friend for a long time, could not calm down, that now there is no friend near her with whom she could meet at any time of the day and talk about everything in the world. Meanwhile, time continued to run on. And now Sophia went to the 3rd grade as Julia met a man. It happened at work when she was carrying a tray of pastries to the hall, and a stranger came up to her and offered to help her carry the burden. Julia was very surprised at that moment, but let the stranger take the tray from her hands. Then she got into conversation with a man whose name was Harry. Her new acquaintance met her after work that same day. Afterward, the couple walked around the city and they told each other about themselves. The young woman then thought that perhaps she had everything in her life in connection with this acquaintance will change. However, this did not happen. The relationship between Julia and Harry lasted a little more than a month and soon they parted. And it happened because the man began to demand that Angelica quit her job. The young woman refused, and between them there was a scandal, and then again there was a conversation on this topic, but then Harry raised his hand on the girl. Julia could not forgive this to the chosen one and told him that between them everything is over. The girl would still forgive Harry the last quarrel, but he did not make a single step to reconciliation. Julia told about her failed John to her friend on the phone. Catherine listened to her pal and after the narration began to reproach Angelica, telling her that it was necessary to humble pride and forgive the man. Julia, hearing this advice from her friend, was indignant and said in response, "How can you say that to me? Think about it. Would you be able to forgive your John if he raised his hand on you?" "You know, I can't give you a definite answer, as it all depends on in which case my spouse would have taken that action. But I think that John would never allow himself to do it. He is not the kind of person," said her friend thoughtfully. "You see, you've answered your own question. So don't tell me I was wrong to turn Harry down. Let's not talk about him anymore. I don't want to bring him up. I just met the wrong person and Mr. Chance proved it," she said. "I won't argue, but just do not put a cross on yourself after this acquaintance. If I do not listen to me, I honestly promise to go to the seer and ask to do the right that you fell in love," said Catherine's friend. "Do not talk nonsense," in response laughing mumbled Angelica, and then added, "Do not need any shamanok and other psychics. All I will still have happiness and love." Time flew by imperceptibly. Julia still worked as a pastry chef, spent her free time with her daughter, who at that time was already 13 years old. The woman tried to make Sophia grow up a happy girl and often talked with her on various topics. Sonia in return carefully treated her mother and did everything in her power so that her mother did not worry about nothing. The girl for this purpose diligently studied at school, helped her mother at home in the household. And so Julia went home from work. She thought about the fact that now her daughter is waiting for her and, as always, heats up dinner. The woman involuntarily smiled at her thoughts. She imagined the concentrated face of Sophia, who always did that when she was in the kitchen. Angelica was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't notice how she approached the roadway and wanted to cross the road as she was suddenly grabbed by her sleeve. The woman involuntarily flinched from the touch and looked at the man. This person turned out to be a man who said reproachfully, "Madam, when crossing the road, then first look at the traffic light, not counting crows. I've just saved you from certain death." "Sorry, I was just thinking." "Thank you very much, Angelica." "Is that really all the thanks you could give to a savior?" "I don't think it's enough," the stranger said with a grin. "How else can I thank you?" "I said thank you," the woman said, perplexed. "It's not enough for me. I'd like to walk you home." "How would you like that?" the man said. "It's not worth it. My husband is waiting for me at home," Angelique said. "You're lying. You're not married, and I'll tell you why I said that. You do not have a wedding ring on your hand," said the interlocutor. "You have a weak argument to say that I am not married. Most women just don't wear jewelry to work," Julia said with a smile. "I agree that I was being silly about the wedding ring. But I'll tell you, you have the look of an unmarried woman. The look of an unmarried woman," the stranger said. "Intriguing. And what is the look of unmarried women?" With a laugh said the interlocutor. "Let me walk you and tell you everything on the way," said the man. "Okay, you got it. Let's go," Julia replied. And after that the couple followed together to the woman's house. While they were walking, Angelica learned that the Savior's name was Archie. He was 42 years old and previously married, divorced a few years ago. The man also revealed that he worked at a poultry farm as a mechanic. Soon the couple approached Angelica's house. They stopped near the entrance and continued chatting. The woman enjoyed talking to her companion, but their conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Julia received a call from her daughter, who asked why she was running late. The woman looked at the time and understood Sophia's anxiety because she should have been home an hour and a half ago. Julia hurried to reassure her daughter and said that she would be there in about 10 minutes. And then the woman looked at the new acquaintance and guiltily waved her hands, letting Archie know that this is the end of their communication. However, the man winked mischievously at the woman and said, "On the first day of acquaintance, I will not ask for a visit, but the phone number will require today. I'm not going to just give up on the girl I like. How fast are you? And if I say that I do not agree?" With a laugh said Angelica, who liked the interlocutor. "If you don't agree, then you won't get home and make your daughter worry about you," the man said with a smile. Julia did not argue with Archie and dictated the phone number, then headed home. The woman was met by her daughter in the hallway and looked at her mother questioningly. The girl was not used to her mother staying late after work like this without warning. Apologized and immediately said that before he could say goodbye, he already missed her. These words caused Julia to smile, and the woman said, "It seems to me that you are a womanizer. We just met today, and you're already saying such things to me. What I think, that's what I'm telling you. Now I kiss you gently on the cheek and say good night. Will I see you tomorrow? And don't even mind about that," the man said. Julia only wanted to answer, but the caller had already disconnected the connection. The woman looked at the phone with a smile, although the conversation was short, but she was pleased with the attention from a new acquaintance. The next day, at the end of the working day, Julia's phone rang again, and Archie offered to meet. The woman did not refuse, and the couple went for a walk around the city. This time Angelica called her daughter and warned her that she would be late. From that day on, Archie met the woman from work every time, and they walked for a while. And then Angelica went home, where her daughter was waiting impatiently for her. Sophia already knew that her mother had an admirer with whom she was spending time. Her mother had informed her about it. The girl somewhere in her heart was not particularly happy that her mother had a boyfriend, because she was afraid that her mother would pay less attention to her. However, this did not happen, and therefore, Sophia soon calmed down about it. A month flew by as Julia dated Archie, and one day the man at the next meeting asked his beloved a question about when they will start living together. The woman looked thoughtfully at the chosen one and said that she had been waiting for this question for a long time because she was tired of the fact that after work she meets Archie, and then they go to his dormitory where they make love, and after that she hurries home to her daughter. The man, after the words of the interlocutor, calmly said that then it was time for him to get acquainted with Sophia. Julia proposed to do it at the weekend. She wanted to prepare her daughter for this meeting. Although Sophia knew that her mother had a man, but she had never seen him, but only heard about this man from her mother. And soon the acquaintance took place. Archie bought a cake and a Barbie doll for the occasion. When the man came to visit and saw the girl, he confusedly said to the landlady, "Yes, your daughter is not a little girl, and I brought a doll. It's time to give lipstick and jewelry." "Don't be silly. Sophia is still a child. She just turned 13, so no expensive gifts," Julia said. After Archie and Sophia met, the couple applied for a marriage license. Julia immediately notified her pal about it. Catherine received the news with delight and inquired about the wedding. Angelica immediately warned that the celebration will not be celebrated, but just sit in a cafe. Catherine congratulated her friend and promised to come to visit for a couple of days. Soon there was a marriage ceremony, and Julia for the second time put a wedding ring on her ring finger. Archie immediately moved to live with his wife, his room in the dormitory. He began to rent to have an additional income. The man knew that Angelica has another apartment which she rents. He then still asked why he did not sell the property, and the chosen one replied that the housing will come in handy as the daughter is growing up. But about the fact that the beloved has savings in the bank, Archie did not know. Julia wanted to tell him about it, but she first had a conversation with a friend who told her, "Don't be in a hurry to tell this man all your cards. You've only known him for a week, and you don't know Archie very well yet. I'm not saying he's a scammer or a con man, but you don't have to be completely upfront about it. You live with the man, and then you can tell me all about it." "You know, maybe you're right. I was just gonna tell Vitalik about it. but I don't think he's a bad person. You won't believe it, but I managed to fall in love with a man once again, and I didn't even hope for it," her friend said. "And I told you that it's too early to give up on yourself. You are still in the juices and give Safia a brother or sister," said Catherine in response. Time moved on slowly, and a few months after the wedding, Julia found out that she was pregnant. The woman rejoiced at this event and reported the news to her husband. Archie took the news not particularly enthusiastic. He said that at this time to have children is a luxury, as there will be additional costs. Angelica was a bit taken aback by her husband's words and said, "I take it you're not at all excited about becoming a dad." "I didn't say that. You have already put me before the fact that you are in an interesting position, and here I cannot change anything. If a woman wants to become a mother, she will not listen to anyone," the man said. "But you tell me only one thing, that you are happy about this event," said the woman. "What can I do? Of course, I am happy that soon the four of us will be living in a 2-room apartment," said the head of the family. "Yes, do not worry about it. We will exchange this apartment and 1-room apartment for a 3-room apartment. We can even exchange it for a 4-room apartment with an extra payment," Julia said happily. "It's true what they say about pregnant women's minds going the wrong way. What extra money?" Archie said irritably. And at the same moment, Julia told her husband that she had savings in the bank from the sale of her late mother-in-law's apartment. Archie looked reproachfully at his wife and said glumly that he had not expected her to hide something from him. Angelica hurriedly hugged her spouse and immediately apologized for not having told about it earlier. Archie, when he found out how much money his wife had in the bank, he quite pronounced, "That's another thing, and plus you will also get maternity capital. In general, I am glad that I will become a father." After these words, the man looked thoughtfully at his wife for a few minutes and suddenly made a suggestion. "Listen, and let you withdraw a certain amount and give me. And I will then go into business, for example, open a tire shop. And I wouldn't have to work at a poultry farm for a dime. And don't even think about business. I had a husband who was an entrepreneur, and how did that end? He's in the cemetery now. I don't want to hear anything about it. I've already lost a dear person because of this business, and I don't want to experience it again," Julia said nervously. "But your late husband didn't have the entrepreneurial spirit. That's why he ended up so badly," Archie said glumly, not expecting his wife to take his proposal to heart. "Please don't speak ill of Billy. He was a wonderful man. And I'd also ask that you don't bring up the business again. I'd rather we keep living the way we're living now and spend the money on more serious things. For example, buy a car, maybe move to another city," said his wife. "Well, let's not talk about it today. It is better to continue this topic when you have a baby. When you get a penny allowance, you will realize that I was right, and we just need to go into business," said the head of the family. Julia did not reply to her husband's last words. The woman was unpleasant that her spouse was so animated when she learned about the finances. It even seemed to Angelica that her husband was more interested in the topic of finances than the news of her pregnancy. The girl did not focus on this, because at the moment she did not want to spoil her mood. A few days later, the woman registered at the antenatal clinic. She has already told her daughter about her pregnancy, who, unlike Archie, took the news with delight and said that she would be happy to babysit a brother or sister in the future. Angelica informed about it and her friend, who at the same moment began to congratulate her friend. Catherine asked how the news was perceived by the husband. The interlocutor lied to her friend and said that her husband is incredibly happy about it. Months flew and soon the woman went on maternity leave. During this time, Julia got a little better, which did not particularly please her husband. Archie did not say aloud to his wife that her fullness does not bring him into delight. However, the chosen one realized this because the head of the family cool took her in intimate terms. The woman on this occasion is very complex, and she decided to talk to her spouse frankly. Angelica took a moment when her daughter was walking and turned to Archie. "You completely stopped paying attention to me, is it because I have gained weight? Don't be ridiculous. I'm just tired at work, because I need to earn money after all. And our family will be an extra mouth to feed," said the man tiredly. "How unkind of you to call our baby an extra mouth. I'm carrying your son inside me, and that's how you talk. Are you talking about that money again? Isn't everything based on finances? We're not poor," the landlady said. "I'm not arguing with you that we are not poor yet, but it's only a matter of time," said the husband. "Listen, if you are talking about savings, then be patient until the birth of the child. And then we'll talk about it," said the woman. "You mean business?" Archie said more gently. "Yes, But not as soon as the baby is born, but a little later, she said. That's a different conversation. But it would be a waste of time, said her husband. For the last 2 months, Archie had repeatedly hinted to Julia about the savings, that it was necessary to take advantage of the finances at the moment. The woman, after such conversations, very nervous and asked her husband not to talk about this topic. However, Archie did not seem to hear his wife and still raised the issue of money. A week before Julia had to go to the maternity hospital, the husband again started talking about savings. The woman involuntarily felt a wave of rage that her husband did not want to understand and hear her, and she nervously said to him, "Do you have a conscience? I'm about to give birth, and you're all the time rubbing me. I should not be nervous, and you make me worry with your talk. We decided that after the baby is born, we'll talk about it." "How difficult you are," the man exclaimed angrily and hit the table with his fist. The wife looked at her husband with fright. She had never seen the chosen one behave like that. The woman did not say anything in response and went to the kitchen, as in the back heard the phrase spouse. "I thought you were a reasonable person, but I was wrong. Do not you notice that we are with you every day more and more distant?" Julia turned to her husband and quietly said in response, "You know, I really regretted telling you about the savings, and we're drifting apart not because of the money, but because of the fact that you may have another woman. Listen, I understand that you have gained weight, but now I have the feeling that your brain is fat," the head of the family said sharply. Julia, hearing this, was shocked. For the first time, her husband addressed her in such a tone and with insults. The woman sharply turned and went into the bathroom. She did not want her chosen one to see her tears. Only after entering the bathroom, the girl burst into tears, and after a while she felt a sharp pain in the lower abdomen. The woman immediately realized that she was going into labor. She jumped out of the bathroom and shouted to her husband to call an ambulance. However, the man was no longer at home. Julia herself called an ambulance and the woman was hospitalized. A few hours later, Angelica gave birth to a baby boy, who was immediately taken somewhere else. The woman asked the doctors what was wrong with her baby, why she was not even allowed to hold the baby in her arms. The doctor told her that the baby was born too weak and with a heart abnormality. Julia saw that the doctor was not telling her the truth, so she said nervously, "Tell me the truth. I am a mother and I have the right to do so." "What can I tell you? Now only the Almighty must be relied upon to keep the baby alive," the man in the white coat said quietly. "Look, you're a doctor. Can you do something for my baby? If it is necessary to take my boy out and operate, I have money and I am ready for anything," Julia said, barely holding back her tears. "You asked for the truth. I told you the truth. Your boy is very weak and cannot be taken out at the moment. Now only a miracle will help, so pray to the Almighty. And I repeat that your boy is very weak and will not be able to stand the road at the moment," the doctor said. Julia went back to the room and there she roared. She could not understand how the doctors could not help her baby. The woman was ready at the moment to give all her savings just to save the baby's life. Only after some time she was able to calm down and then called her daughter and husband. Archie, when he heard his wife's voice, he immediately said that he was already aware of all the events. Julia did not sleep a wink that night. She prayed to the Virgin Mary all night. In the morning, however, the woman was informed that the baby had died in the early morning. Julia wept after the sad news. She hated the doctors at this point, as she had placed her hope in them. As soon as the woman calmed down, a nurse approached her. "I realize you are having a hard time right now, but I need to know, are you going to bury the baby?" "What kind of a stupid question is that?" "Naturally, yes," Julia said in a detached tone. When the husband found out about the decision about the funeral, he said angrily to her when the woman was discharged from the hospital, "Why are you taking the body of a baby? So many people leave the dead to medical professionals in such cases. Don't you realize that burying a baby is a stupid waste of money? I understand if you had the baby in your arms or if he had already lived with us, but I can't understand your behavior. This is our son, and I'm not gonna give him up. I owe it to the baby to put him in the ground. Although, what am I explaining to you now, when all your thoughts are only about money?" the woman said deeply. Soon the funeral of the baby took place. Julia was crying silently in the cemetery, and her daughter stood beside her, who was also suffering that she no longer had a baby brother. Archie stood off to the side. The man had been angry with his wife since her discharge from the hospital and had not spoken to his spouse. On the other side of Julia was a buddy who had also come to support her friend. A couple days after the funeral, when Catherine was about to leave for home, she decided to talk to Angelica. She turned to her friend with the words, "I understand that it is not easy for you now, and I can see that you and Archie don't get along very well. But right now, I'm worried about your daughter. You know, your family is going through a rough patch right now, and Sophia sees it all. And believe me, it's not easy for her right now. I want you to take the girl with you. My parents moved from here to the country to live. I told you about it. I'm going to visit them with my family, so let me take Sophia with me. It's summer. She'll gain strength. You know that I won't let anyone hurt her. She's like my own daughter. In the meantime, while Sophia is away, you'll sort out your relationship with your husband. You two are in a cold war, and you realize that your daughter should not watch your squabbles, your relationship with each other. She's a modest girl, and she's very worried about you. I don't even know what to say, because I've never been away from my daughter for so long. Yes, and we should ask Sophia, in case she doesn't want to," Julia said quietly. "Sophia, just agree. I've already talked to her. And I'll tell you, your child at least breathe fresh country air, not this gassy. He'll rest and gain strength over the summer. Agree to my proposal," persistently said Catherine. "Since you have already decided everything behind my back, I will not put sticks in the wheel. For Sophie, I do not worry, as I know what a great mom you are," with a smile said the interlocutor. And soon Sophia left with Catherine, and Julia and her husband were left alone. Angelica actually saw that she and Archie were living like strangers. Couple went to bed. Then Archie again amazed the woman. He began to passionately embrace and kiss his chosen one, and then they had a stormy night of love. From that time, the man became more attentive to Julia, and the woman thought that perhaps it was her fault, since her husband was so cold to her. Angelica felt desirable again. The woman was glad that their family again comes peace and harmony as it was before. Summer flew by, and Sophia returned home. Not her daughter Julia, who was surprised to notice that her daughter's angular figure had disappeared. The woman called her friend and said with a laugh, "Confess, what have you done with my child? I sent you a girl, and from you came to me a lovely girl called Sophia." "Oh, come on, girl. Your child is 14 years old, and it's high time she became a girl. Yes, and do not forget that she rested in the fresh air and drank everyday cow's milk," said Catherine. Archie came home and saw his stepdaughter. The man also noticed that Sophia had changed for the better after the trip to the village. Archie smirked and approached the girl with the words, "And you have blossomed right in a short period of time, very unexpected." "Thank you," Sophia said, embarrassed. And life went on again. Sophia went to school, Julia and her husband worked. The landlady should have been happy that everything was going well in their family. However, the woman noticed that after the summer, Archie, as if at the stroke of a magic wand, again became rude, cooled in intimate terms. Angelica could not understand these sudden changes. The woman analyzed her behavior, trying to understand why the spouse again away from her. Julia tried to talk to her husband on this topic, and only she asked a question about their joint relationship, as Archie glumly replied that she should take an example from Sophia. The wife looked perplexed at her husband and asked, "How do you want me to understand you? After childbirth, how much time has passed, and you still cannot bring your figure back to normal?" "That's what I'm talking about," frowned the head of the family. "But what does this have to do with Sophia?" "Yes, I have a couple of extra pounds, but they do not spoil my figure." "I don't understand you at all. You started to take to the bottle again," indignantly said his wife. "Don't booze on me, I'm tired," said the husband irritably. A week passed after this conversation. Julia was at work when her daughter called her and said in a crying voice that her stepfather was harassing her. The woman at the first minute could not understand what it was about and asked Sophia again. The girl reported that Archie came in an inebriated state and tried to kiss her on the lips, but she broke free and is now in the yard of the house. Julia asked her daughter to stay there as well and reported that she would be home from work soon. The woman was furious after the phone call. She was coming from work with the decision that she would kick this man out of the apartment today. Julia approached the house and saw her daughter there with a teary face. The woman hugged Sophia and asked her not to worry. Soon they entered the house. Angelica intended to immediately talk to the man and kick Archie out of the apartment. But she was unable to do so because the man was sleeping soundly and there was an empty bottle of white wine lying beside him. This night Julia spent in her daughter's room. She was waiting impatiently for the morning to come. And as soon as the woman heard that her husband woke up, she immediately told him everything about yesterday's situation and then demanded that she was no longer going to live with Archie. At the same moment, the man knelt down in front of the landlady and began to apologize. The man justified himself by saying that he was under the influence of strong drink and did not realize what he was doing. He begged Julia to forgive him and swore that it would not happen again. And after Archie came up to Sophia and also began to ask him to apologize, the girl looked at her mother. She didn't know what to say to her stepfather. She felt a little sorry for the man at that moment. Julia thought for a while and then took the word from her spouse that he would never again drink strong drinks. Archie, in response, made a promise and hugged his beloved. The woman then looked at her daughter and asked if the girl agreed with her decision. Sophia nodded silently. She sincerely believed her stepfather when he asked for forgiveness. After this incident, 10 days passed and Archie actually stopped drinking. He behaved quite properly with his wife and did not allow himself to harass his stepdaughter. Julia breathed a sigh of relief that everything would be all right again. But her expectations were not destined to come true, because soon her daughter called and confused voice said that Archie is drunk and trying to hug and kiss again. Julia asked Sophia, "Where are you now?" "In the next door. I'm afraid to go home," holding back sobs, said the girl. "Calm down and don't cry. This will not happen again. I will now call my partner and ask me to substitute, and then I will put this scoundrel forever out of our apartment, and he will not touch you again. I'm not going to forgive that man a second time," the woman said firmly. Sophia sat down in the entrance on the windowsill and began to wait for her mother from work. The girl waited for an hour and a second, and her mother was still not there. Sophia called Julia, but the subscriber was out of range. The girl looked at the phone with bewilderment and could not understand what was happening. She made several more calls within an hour, but she still couldn't get in touch. Sophia was at a loss as she didn't know what to do. She was afraid to go home because of her stepfather, and she could not get in touch with her mother. And then her phone rang, and she was informed that her mom was hit by a car when she was crossing the road. And the girl was immediately told that Julia died without regaining consciousness. It was later that Sophia and Archie learned that Julia had left work and hurried home and began to cross the roadway in the wrong place, where she fell under the wheels of the car, where the drunk driver was behind the wheel. Soon there was a funeral. The girl sobbed desperately when the coffin was lowered into the grave. She could not believe that now her mom was no longer in this world. Sophia shuddered to think how she would now live her life under the same roof as her stepfather. A few days passed after the funeral. Sophia went to her mother's grave every day, and this day she also came to the cemetery. The girl stood near the grave and, wiping her tears, quietly said, "Why did you leave me? Now my life has turned into hell and I don't know what to do. I don't want to go back home where this man lives. Mommy, give me a sign from above. How should I go on living? Maybe I should go to heaven with you." And at that moment, Sophia heard a woman's voice behind her, which said, "What are you saying? You can't try to leave this world before your due date. Look how young you are, and you have your whole life ahead of you." Sophia turned around and saw before her an old woman in a black scarf who looked at her carefully. The girl stood silent and did not know what to say in response. The stranger took the initiative. She quietly but firmly said, "I buried my son here 3 days ago, and every day I see you on this grave. I understand that your mom is lying here and she was buried recently. But now it's not about that. I heard what you said here recently, and I'd like to hear you say why you're complaining so much about life." And at that moment, Sophia suddenly sobbed desperately. The old woman approached the girl and put her arm around her shoulders. The stranger did not try to calm Sophia at the moment. She understood that her interlocutor needed to give vent to her emotions. The couple stood like that for a few minutes, and only after the girl spoke, "I really do not know what to do. And you tell me everything, and together with you, we will think about what to do in your situation," quietly said the old woman. And Sophia began to tell about her mother, about the fact that she was left alone to live with her stepfather, who was trying to get her into bed. The girl spoke confusedly, jumping from one moment to another. The stranger listened to her interlocutor without interrupting or asking any questions. And as soon as Sophia was silent, the old woman said, "My name is Cindy. Now I will ask you some questions and you will answer them. Why did you tell your mom's friend at the funeral? She wasn't there. Uncle Archie said he called her and told her, but Aunt Catherine didn't come. That's strange to me, because they were very good friends," she said quietly. "Then why did you call Catherine yourself?" Cindy asked, perplexed. "The second day after the funeral, my stepfather took away my phone, so I couldn't call Aunt Catherine. I'd love to dial her number, but I don't remember it. I have a bad memory for numbers, Sophia said, almost crying. So it's all clear to me. Well, and why not tell about the fact that you are molested by your stepfather at school? For example, the psychologist or class teacher? Said the old woman. To be honest, I'm ashamed and I'm afraid of my stepfather. He warned me if I even talk, he will do everything so that everyone will think that I'm a walking girl and molest him, quietly replied the girl. What a scoundrel, your stepfather. But you do not worry, this man can be nailed to the nail. And now let's do this. You go in my house to sleep overnight. I think that the stepfather will not have enough to worry if you did not come stepdaughter home. I think he thinks you're already under his influence, but we'll prove to him that's not the case, Cindy said. How are we going to do that? Sophia asked, perplexed. We'll come to my house and I'll tell you everything, the old woman said with a smile. The next day, Cindy and Sophia knocked on Archie's apartment. The man opened the door and looked at the stranger and his stepdaughter with surprise. Then Archie said sternly to the girl, Where have you been, you rascal? I didn't sleep all night because of you. You should be flogged with a belt, so that next time you do not do such things. After these words, the man turned to Cindy and eloquently said, And thank you, ma'am, for bringing my stepdaughter home. Young man, you and I are going to have a short conversation, but initially, I'd like to enter the apartment, not stand on the doorstep. Although if you want all the neighbors to know about your actions, I can continue the conversation here, said the old woman. What nonsense are you talking about? The man said unhappily, but he let the stranger and her stepdaughter into the apartment. Cindy walked into the hall and sat down in a chair, while Sophia stood next to her, trying not to look at her stepfather. The older woman looked at Archie and said rather sternly, I will not play with you. I understand that you, probably after the funeral of his wife, anticipated lovemaking with his stepdaughter and even rubbed his hands from the upcoming event. Well, I'm only here because I'm not gonna let that poor kid get hurt. She's had enough grief in her life. Her father died in his time, and now her mother has gone to heaven. And you, my good man, you're allowing yourself to abuse this girl. Sophia told me all about how you molest her and try to get her into bed. The girl can lie about a lot of things, because kids are like that nowadays. Every word is a lie, Archie said pompously. You're a grown man, but you say such platitudes. Listen to me carefully. I've lived enough in this world to believe me. I have good connections, especially my son, whom I recently buried, worked in the police. And I don't have to tell you that if you make a report on you now, the machine of justice will work in full force. And you'll have to take a polygraph and a lot of interrogations. And note that they will believe not you, but this girl, the old woman said sternly. You will not be able to prove anything, said the man muffled. You just gave proof that you are guilty. I recorded our entire conversation on a tape recorder. Now stop making a circus out of this. If you don't hear me now, then the next time I will come to you, not me, but the police officer, said the visitor. What do you want from me? Archie said in a muffled voice. Your dead wife's address book. We need Catherine's number. And I want your spirit out of this apartment in a couple of days. And thank Sophia for not wanting to go to the police and report you. And one more thing, don't ever go near that girl, Cindy said firmly. Soon Sophia was on the phone with Catherine, whom she told everything. Her companion gasped as she was completely unaware that Julia had died. Catherine told Sophia that she had been trying to call her friend for a couple days, but her friend was off the grid. At that moment, Catherine could not even imagine that Angelica was not alive. 2 days later, Catherine already came to Sophia. The woman immediately said that she would adopt the girl and take her to live with her. And she also thanked Cindy that the pensioner did not remain indifferent to the child's misfortune and gave her a helping hand. The old woman looked at Catherine and said, And it could not have been otherwise. I am glad that the mother of this girl has such a wonderful friend. Now I see that no one will hurt Sophia. I think that Julia thanks you in heaven for sheltering her daughter. And then Catherine asked Sophia if she was sure she didn't want to punish Archie. The girl replied that she didn't want to know anything more about that man at all. And then she said in an adult way, Let the Lord God be his judge, not me. The main thing is that now I will live with you, and I do not need more. Well, if that's the way you decide, then so be it. And now we have a lot of things to do with you. Adoption, moving, and everything in this way, said Catherine cheerfully.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.